And welcome back to another episode of Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 73. Holy moly, 73. I am your host, Jared Morris. Very, very excited to be here on this Thursday morning because it means that it is time for another episode of Thank You Thursday, the day of the week that we set aside to celebrate and practice gratitude. Now, this episode is going to go in two pretty wildly divergent ways, but just bear with me here. I want to start out by just celebrating a great act of gratitude that I saw last night. The Chicago Cubs, as you may have heard by now, were swept in the playoffs. If you're not a big sports fan, the reason why the Cubs tend to be a big story whenever they're in the playoffs is that it doesn't happen that often. And the Cubs, they haven't won a World Series in a long, long time, a long, long time. And they've kind of carved out this niche, or they had for a while, as the lovable losers. And there's curses, and they have one of the more unique backstories of any American sports team. And so everybody's kind of waiting for that time when they're going to break through, like the Boston Red Sox did back in 2004. Well, it didn't happen. They got swept, and it brought to an end what was really an enthusiastic season for Cubs fans because they have an exciting young team. They came a year ahead of schedule, as we say sometimes when young sports teams perform better than you think they will. And so there's a lot of hope for the future, but obviously a lot of disappointment that this season came to such a kind of crash landing here at the end, losing 4-0. But what I saw last night, I love as a sports fan and as someone who, obviously my work with the Indiana Hoosiers basketball team would show you that I get really invested in my sports teams. And I loved how the Cubs at the end of that game, instead of sulking and going back into their clubhouse and feeling sorry for themselves, they came out onto the field and showed appreciation to their fans, waving to them, thanking them because they lost the game at home. Obviously, they wouldn't have been able to do this if they had been in New York. But I just thought it was a real classy gesture of a group of guys who could, be and feel and act as entitled as anybody because they're athletes and they're famous and they're so talented and they make a lot of money. But they realize that the only reason they get to do what they do for the amount of money they get to do it for is because those fans, those crazy fans in Chicago, show up game after game and season after season supporting this team, and in particular this franchise that has delivered so much heartache, and yet they still show up. And I just loved how the Cubs, the managers, the players went out of their way to show appreciation. That is gratitude, man. That it really is. And it was a small gesture, but I think it was just really classy. It was the most graceful way to exit a season that the Cubs could do, and just a great, if we're talking about gratitude and thank yous, them going out and saying thank you to their fans, to me, it was sports beautiful. I know, kind of weird like that, but, it's one of those moments that I didn't cry tears or anything, but you get a little verklempt, you get a little emotional as a sports fan seeing stuff like that because the relationship, the bond between fan and team can be weirdly, inexplicably special sometimes, and it certainly was there. So that is the first example of gratitude that I want to talk about today. And now it's time for that weekly tradition of thank you notes. And so I didn't have one last week, but I do have one this week. As I mentioned, I was in Philadelphia, or as I mentioned on a previous episode, I was in Philadelphia at the beginning of this week for the Ascend conference that AWeber put on. I had the good fortune, the privilege of speaking there on Tuesday morning. Really, really enjoyed it. Made a lot of great connections, met a lot of really interesting people. Also had the opportunity to host a lunch on Tuesday talking about podcasting, and I got to hear so many great stories and plans and ideas for what people want to do with their podcast. And it was just really, really exciting, really fun. And one thing I've noticed is, and I don't want to speak for all people who speak at conferences, I speak more for myself, is that if you're not careful, it can become easy to think that you are the special one when it takes two, right? Like, yes, hopefully I have some interesting information to give, and I have done some things in my career that make me a worthwhile choice for a speaker, but also someone has to put that audience together. Someone has to put the conference on. Someone has to assemble that event and open up the opportunity for me to speak at that. And that's what AWeber did. And I thought they put on a great event. And I'm very appreciative that they opened their event up to me and offered me one of the spots to speak and allowed me to do that. And so that's who my thank you goes today, is to Tom Colzer, Monica Gilson, Brandon Olson, Brandon Bissinger. And I mean, I could name folks from AWeber till the end of the show, but just so many people who made it happen and who helped make my experience there great. So here's my thank you card that will be going in the mail to Philadelphia when I get done with the show. So dear Tom and the entire AWeber team, thank you for putting on such a great event in Philadelphia and for including me as a part of it. I really appreciate you sharing your audience with me and offering me the chance to speak. I hope the audience got as much out of the experience as I did. I also must extend special thank yous to Monica Gilson, Brandon Olson, and Brandon Bissinger for their help in coordinating everything and making my personal experience of the event as smooth and productive as it possibly could be. Good luck with your exciting direction, and I look forward to continuing to work together in the future. Jared Morris. So that is my thank you to AWeber, and now I flip it back around on you, dear beloved Primility viewer and or listener. Who are you feeling grateful for today? Who could you thank today, and what action can you take to show your gratitude? Maybe it's an email, maybe it's a call, maybe it's just a quiet action that will help somebody because they have helped you, or maybe even they didn't help you already, and it's just something that you are doing to pay it forward, or maybe it's a written thank you card like that. Think about someone. Let's use today, this Thursday, to practice gratitude. You'll feel better. They'll feel better. The world will become a better place. That's the big idea. All right, everybody. Thank you for watching, for listening to this episode of Primility Primer. I appreciate it. If you have not already, join our Facebook group. We've been having some good discussions. If you're worried about the Facebook group clogging up your Facebook timeline, don't. You know, I try to start a discussion or two a week in there. We keep it simple. We keep it light. It's a very small but slowly and steadily growing group. And if you're interested in taking these discussions about Primility a little bit further, the Facebook group is a great place to do it. So go to facebook.com/Primility, request access. I'll know that you listen to the show because I only give out the URL on the show or to people who have subscribed to the email list. So Primility.com/Facebook. Join us for additional discussion about these Primility topics. Other than that, I will see you tomorrow morning as we wrap up this week of Primility Primer episodes. In the meantime, stay cognizant of your pride and your humility, and we will talk tomorrow. Wrist bump.